What is up, everybody? It is Dynamic here, back again with another video. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of MLW players in the NL for the 2023 season. Now, last video we did the AL, so make sure to go check that out. I'll put the link in the description. But today we're going to be doing all the players from the NL, so without further ado, here we go. Okay, so we're going to start out with Zach Whalen from the Eagles. He's hitting at 318. He's hitting at 318 this year, and he's hit 2 home runs. So he's been having a pretty good season so far. I think he's one of those guys that are kind of like borderline all-star to, all-star. For me, at least, I think he's pretty underrated. What do you think?
Yeah, for me personally, I do think he's just an all-star. So I'd say in between B and A, but I'm leaning more towards B just because he's not a super efficient defensive player, but he's about as good as it gets offensively from any kind of other role player you want. So
yeah, I'd put him at like a high B. I think he's like a high B player. All right, moving on. Let's move on to Reese Harris from the Great Lakes Gators. Hasn't really played too much this season. But I think he's a pretty solid player. He's hitting 222, but once again, he's had barely any at-bats. I could see him getting a bigger role, especially on a team that I feel like is kind of tanking, even though they don't have a pick.
Yeah, I'd say the Gators are primed to end up being the worst team in the league, which makes the most sense. And as you said, we haven't seen much from Reese Harris, and I would like to see more, especially because, again, this team is losing games. As of right now, I see more of a D to C player. That one's up to you.
Yeah, I put him in D. I feel like he hasn't really had like that many opportunities, so I put him in D. Casey Bennett from the Downtown Diamondbacks. He's kind of one of those borderline all-star players. Once again, he had a pretty good start to the season this year. I don't know if he's going to continue that way, but he's looking good so far, especially from the plate. He's hitting .312, which is really good. Way better than I expected, with a couple home runs too. So what do you think?
Yeah, hasn't had a bunch of at-bats, but it's enough to where he's been he's been contributing a lot. He's not on the B tier yet, so he's definitely C in my opinion. If he had more at-bats this year and he was able to at least, continue his numbers that he has now, I would definitely see him in B, but just because, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities, but he's still doing really good with those, that's definitely a high C player.
Let's move on to Jordan Robles from the Midwest Mallards. Jordan Robles is one of, in my opinion, the best players in the league. I don't know if he's up to S tier yet. He's still pretty young for the league. Like, this is only his second year, so I want to put him at S tier. But I definitely say he's an A tier player, a very high A tier player that I think will eventually be an S tier player. Now we're going to be moving on to Landon Urquides from the Eagles. He's been injured this entire year, so that kind of makes me want to put him into F tier just because he hasn't played. But he's also been injured. He's been at the games. Like, it's not really his fault. So I'd put him at like a D tier, I think.
Yeah, for me, I think Landon Urquides had a pretty solid season last year as a rookie, especially a lower round pick rookie. So I liked him a lot. I want to put him in D, but he hasn't got to play much at all. So I think F probably makes the most sense.
Yeah. Let's go to his brother, Carson Urquides. It's kind of the same story with him. He's gotten, plate attempts. He's hitting .250 from the plate, which is pretty good.
He has 1 hit, so that means he has 4 at-bats.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten many chances. So since he hasn't gotten many chances, I kind of want to put him D tier or F tier. But I definitely think his brother's better than him.
I would agree. It's just the fact that his brother hasn't played at all. But, he's not batting 0, and he is young, so I think D makes the most sense. Reese Harris and him make the most sense for me.
Jason Chadwick of the Great Lakes Gators, traded last year midseason from the Metro Magic. In my opinion, he's kind of gradually gotten worse every year. I like Jason Chadwick. I think he's a good player. He's been pretty good from the plate, hitting .250. He's been decently efficient as like their second best hitter, but he also makes some mistakes fielding wise, and I think that's important to, point out as well. I see him being like a B tier player, maybe a C tier player.
Yeah, Jason Chadwick on the Magic was one of their pitchers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And he hasn't, just because Jorgensen and Cheatham are on this team, he hasn't ever needed to. So that kind of takes away from that. If he can be a more consistent hitter, I'd like to see him in B. But as of right now, due to the fact that they're losing games, he's not terrible. He is a home run. But also because, as you mentioned, his fielding errors, I think C, high C makes the most sense.
Blade Walker from the Eagles. Once again, a role player, but I'd say a really good role player. He can hit home runs. He's not a liability. Like, whenever he goes to the plate, he's a guy that can get it done. He is only batting 150 from the year, which isn't great at all, and he only has one home run. But I see him as a guy that's only improved from last year.
Yeah, I would agree. You have to like the fact that the Eagles are trying to get him on the mound and they're trying to develop that pitching because due to the fact that Daniel Schultz has, regressed on the mound, they need someone else to step up. Blade Walker, while not having a game against the Diamondbacks, definitely bounced back the next series. So I like that aspect of him. So I'm definitely feeling probably low C to mid C.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's a C tier player. Moving on, let's go to Jorgensen from the Gators, another Gators player, kind of focusing on the Eagles and Gators here. I think he's a great player. I think he could be an A tier player. His pitching hasn't been great, of course. But he's not supposed to be the main pitcher. It's supposed to be Cheatham at the end of the day. He's kind of had to step into that role, but hitting-wise, he's been really good. He's batting over 400, if I'm not mistaken. So for me, he's an A-tier player. Obviously he's not as good as Robles, but for me this year, he's an A-tier player.
Definitely. I think he's an A player. I do.
I'd agree with that. I think he's an A player too. All right, let's move on to Trey Flood. I talked about Trey Flood a little bit in the Most Improved video, and I think he will win Most Improved. To me, he's just had a really good year from the mound, and I don't think the Diamondbacks would be as successful as they are now without him. You know what I mean? His ERA right now is 0.75, which is really good. That's better than Jimmy Norp, which is pretty crazy. And so for me, he's a B tier player, which is, definitely solid.
Yeah, I would agree. He is an all-star. He's becoming one of their most effective pitchers there in the in the Diamondbacks organization, and he's exactly what they wanted to turn him into. So I'd say B makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think B tier is good for him. Let's move on here. Let's go to Jonah Heath. He's hitting 250 from the plate. He's a good bright spot for them. I think he was the number 1 seed in the home run derby, if I'm not mistaken. He's very solid. I'd put him at like a B tier. I think he's kind of around Trey Flood. He could have been an all-star this year, in my opinion.
I actually don't agree. I think Jonah Heath, while yes, is a very good hitter, he doesn't really, he doesn't show much more value than that. He doesn't field very well. He's just a first baseman there to catch a ball. And he only has one home run on the year, which is what he's supposed to do. And he only has one, which was just in the last series. So I still feel C. I think he's a good player. I think when he's playing good, he could be a borderline all-star. But as of right now, I don't think he was.
Let's go to Jimmy Norp. He's hitting 286 from the plate, which is really good because he's super consistent. He has one home run this year, which isn't great, but pitching-wise, he's been solid too. In my opinion, he's an S-tier player. He just leads this team. He's had some rough games this year, but I don't think that has really affected his team much, in where he would have a bad game and then the Diamondbacks would do really bad last year.
He's just like the definition of an S-tier player.
Mm-hmm.
So,
he's S-tier for sure. Let's move on to Matt Carlington from the Midwest Mallards. He's a rookie. I think he wasn't really supposed to play too much this year, and he hasn't played a ton, but from a hitting perspective, whenever I'm watching a video, he makes contact. Even if he's making contact and it's like a ground out, he's making good contact. There's sometimes where he gets really unlucky. Like, I think he's got robbed twice this year, and he's still hitting 231. So for me, he's a C tier player. For me, he's better than Reese Harris and your guys.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Also, just because he's actually playing, and yeah, like you said, he gets contact. He has been robbed a few times, and I think he's also a good pitcher on the mound. They haven't had to test out really much at all, but I think if they would ever need to, he could definitely develop into a really good player. So I think C makes the most sense.
Wasn't he pitching in the spring training game?
Yeah,
I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Go to Davenport. Davenport to me is a player that, he's not hitting super well. He's hitting below 100.
Yeah, I mean, I think him and Reese Harris are in the same part, except for the fact that Davenport has been looked at more, right? They actually like playing him. So I would agree. He's definitely D tier.
Yeah. Let's move on here. Preston Colm. He's hitting 143, which isn't great for sure. He doesn't pitch. He's only an outfielder and a hitter. But from the outfield, he's been playing pretty well. Obviously, that picture is from the robbery that he had on Brendan Russell. We kind of touched on that last video. But he's been good from the field, and he's been below average from the plate. He's a hard player to rate. I kind of want to give him D.
Past few series, he just hasn't been hitting at all. Very easy strikeout or ground out. But the thing that kind of helped him a little bit was that robbery. He kind of turned it up a little bit on the defensive side. He's just hitting a little bit of rut, still batting 143, considering he has not been very good recently, isn't bad. So I feel tempted to put him in the C tier.
I'd put him in the D tier. I think he's not as good as these players that we're seeing.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
And also, we might change some things around at the end of this tier list. Too, I'm noticing some things that I feel like I'd want to change a little bit now, just looking at it in grand scheme. So we'll see what we think. Sticking with the Mallards, we have Tommy Coughlin III. Tommy Coughlin, he's this team's captain. He's a great captain, great leader. He's hitting .312, which is really good. 6 home runs, which is definitely leading the league.
So he's a solid fielder, and as everyone knows, he used to pitch. It just doesn't make much sense now that they have 3 pitchers, 4 even, because Caden Irwin has been on the mound before. So really, TC3, I think, is a borderline S tier player.
I feel like if we put him in S, we have to put Jordan Robles in S. Because Jordan Robles is, technically he hasn't hit as many home runs for sure, but he's batting .381 compared to Coughlin's .312.
That's true.
So if we put Tommy S, Robles has to go S.
That is true. I think Robles is more dynamic. I almost feel the need to put Tommy in A and move Robles up to S.
I agree with that. So that makes more sense, at least to me. I think it makes more sense to both of us. Robles is, even though Tommy kind of looks like the captain of this team, Robles has been just the better player statistically.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Gators here. Talking about Chris Cheatham, he's had an up and down season. Batting wise has not been good. He's hitting 120. Pitching has not been great either. He kind of was forced to become the second arm of this team last year because he was playing so badly last year. To me, he's a C tier player.
Really sure how he was an all-star because his batting has not been good and his pitching hasn't been great. So I feel the need this season. Chris Cheatham has been a C tier player, but he did make an all-star. But I still believe he's a C tier player.
I think he's a C tier player. I think that all-star that he had was kind of weird. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of talks about that. Then there's Zerleg. Brendan Zerleg, and in my opinion, he's a D tier player. He's hitting 167, can't really do much more than that. He kind of reminds me of Agner a bit. I've said that in other videos. To me, he's a D tier player.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of thought he was hitting worse, although he hasn't had many at-bats. He's second lowest on his team.
All right, next we have Jacob Pishka from the Diamondbacks. He's a good player. Haven't seen much of him this year just because he hasn't really shown up too much. He hasn't played in that many games, but he's batting .222. The potential is there, it's just I haven't seen enough.
to be hard for him to find a spot. They have a lot of depth. So I still feel the need to put him in D.
Yeah. I think he's D.
Yeah.
I think he's D. All right. Moving on once again, we have Dallas Allen from the Eagles. Allen, he's a pitcher. He can hit too. We saw in the Derby that he could hit pretty well, and this year he's hitting 308. And he's pitching pretty well too. He's been their ace for the last couple years. I'd put him at A tier. Just because I think his stuff is nasty. I think it's really unhittable, especially that banana ball. And we've seen different variations of that. And then hitting-wise, he's been really good this year, better than I thought he was doing.
Yeah, he's definitely an A player. At the beginning of the year, last year, he would have been an S. And I think he would have beaten out Robles for that. But yeah, as of right now, A tier, just because this team isn't finding as much success, although they did have a bounce back series. Almost at 500 again, but yes, an A player.
And now moving on, we're going to go with Daniel Schultz, the captain of this Eagles team. Not hitting great at 182, and pitching-wise, he has a 14 ERA and hasn't pitched since then.
I feel the need to C to D. He's not a terrible hitter. He just hasn't been great. He has, I think, only one home run. Or no, he has 0 home runs, but he is batting 182 with the most at-bats on his team. So I feel that I want to put him in C. This one's up to you.
I feel like he isn't much better than what we're seeing on D tier. I'll put him in C just for the respect thing. Because for me, it's so close that you just kind of have to acknowledge what he's done to make this ranking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as I said, I believe you see.
The Diamondbacks, we have Michael Shima batting 190. He just provides a lot of depth to this team. In my opinion, he's the definition of a C-tier player. What do you think?
I would agree. He's definitely the definition of a C-tier player. A lot of C's here.
And we had none in the AL, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Here we are moving on to Caden Irwin from the Midwest Mallards. He is batting 273. He's been having a decent season. I've noticed a couple fielding mistakes here and there, but I think he's a B-tier player for me.
Yeah, personally, I think he's a B-tier player. He just hasn't played enough yet, but I still think he's a B-tier player with his numbers.
So we're going to talk about this, see if we want to make any changes, see if we want to just leave it the same, and then we'll get back to you with our final tier list of the NL. Okay, so we decided to make one change, which is move Carlington down to a D tier, probably the highest D tier here, but our reasoning was that we just really haven't seen enough of him to put him at C tier yet.
Yeah, we just got too excited. We like what he has, but he hasn't done it enough yet.
Yeah, we're really excited of the upside in him, but as of right now, he's just not at the level that all these other C tier players are for us. But yeah, so this is our final NL 2023 MLW tier list. Let us know what you think in the comments. Make sure you like the video. We posted the other video yesterday, so this one's going to be releasing a little bit later. But so far, that video is doing really well. So, let's hope that this one does really well. And make sure you guys comment, subscribe, do everything y'all need to do. And peace.